We waiting on
You thought I lived 30 minutes
Kevin?
away?
No.
Take
Yeah, Roy?
You're
Royce. He said.
what? Oh, he's not away from me.
Yeah,
Right.
he'll be here.
Welcome back, commissioners.
West.
Happy afternoon. Commissioner Rogers will be joining us virtually for the afternoons. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. And I am reminded that I need to download the updated packet. And for members of our community who may be tuning in after our lunch break, please know that our agenda has been adjusted. What was previously item 7 on the American for Disabilities Act, as well as what was previously, did I say 6? I meant to say 6, as well as what was previously item 7, Community Participation Organization Program. Those 2 items are being rescheduled into the future due to unforeseen circumstances that have affected our staff's ability to present today. We are proceeding with the broadband investment strategy conversation, and we added TV highway to today's agenda.
For members of the public that may be interested and for your board's awareness, the ADA item and also the CPO item have been rescheduled for May 9th.
Oh, good. May.
It is only a few weeks away.
I'm ready for spring flowers, so I don't want to complain that it's May already, but time is going by so quickly. And we have so much good work to do. I'm having trouble adjusting. Okay, end of wine, Catherine. So, let's see, we did that letter. So now we get to call up Matt Craigie and Dorian Russell of our team to wow me. I know you're going to teach me things. I sincerely hope that multiple light bulbs go off for me, because I don't get it yet.
We strive for light bulbs, Chair Harrington. Thank you. For the record, my name is Matt Cree. I'm Washington County's Economics Development Manager, and joining me is Dorian Russell, ARPA Program Manager. Thank you. And
She didn't bring any notes though, so
we're going to share our notes.
Oh, now I'm really in.
There we go.
My paper.
Oh, good. Love it up.
Oh,
So this afternoon here, we're going to be providing the board with an update on the ARPA funded project, which is the Countywide Broadband Investment Strategy. This project is just about complete. I actually have a draft here. It's just a draft. It's not quite ready yet. But we know about your board's strong interest in this topic. And so before we finish up this project, we wanted to touch base and make sure that we're on the right track. Let's see if it works after it does. So the purpose for today's presentation is threefold. It's to provide this update about the strategy project, to gather your input, to hear about thoughts, reflections, concerns that you all have about the direction of this project, and affirm your interest in exploring future investments in broadband infrastructure and programming. That is, so that there is the policy question. There is, again, about those kind of questions, reflections, concerns that you might have about the direction of this work that we've been working on here for the past year. With that, I'll turn it to Dorian.
All right, going back in time, it's been quite a bit since we've been in front of your board on this project. We have a very complex multidisciplinary report that we will be so excited to bring to you very soon. We wanted to provide a little bit of regrounding today. We also know that things may have substantially changed since the last time we had a conversation. So I want to hear where you all are at today. The last time that we met, we talked about the impact of broadband and how the scientific community has characterized this as a super social determinant of health. And a social determinant of health are things economic-wise, social-wise, environment-wise that help us to predict outcomes over the course of a person's life. So broadband is so important in predicting positive outcomes and access to care, education, employment, social connection, and more, that we are now categorizing it as super. Next slide, please. You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of this being an ARPA investment, we really understand that the pandemic underscored what we knew bold, underlined, italic. We know that equitable access to government services, education, job opportunities, this requires affordable and reliable internet.
And for me, one of the big ahas too was getting the reinforcement that it's up and down the age spectrum.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll be happy to share some more demographic information in the forthcoming report. So glad you're bringing that up.
Wonderful. So just to talk about the board's journey here with this project, there's actually a couple studies that we've been working on over the past couple years. With your board's leadership, county staff has been working with partners on a couple projects. In 2021, we joined COLPAC, that's the Columbia Pacific Economic Development District, on a broadband infrastructure assessment project. So the study's goals were to assess the landscape of middle mile broadband infrastructure, providing a path towards connecting anchor institutions, offering commercial common activity, and planning and designing fiber infrastructure close enough to underserved households to incentivize new development for last mile infrastructure. So findings from the COLPAC study have been useful in understanding needed connections in that area, in particular Western Washington County, and for cities in that area, in particular Banks and North Plains. One thing I should note during this presentation is that there's a lot of jargon when we talk about broadband. And so if I ever say a term, if Dorian and I say something and you're unfamiliar with that term, please stop us and we'll do our best to give you the definition. Just for everyone's sake, middle mile refers to the backbone fiber infrastructure that connects different nodes, different areas within a community, and which enables last mile connections, which would be connections from those nodes to businesses and to households.
And since we're here on the vocabulary, the conversation that I had with Commissioner Yamamoto yesterday, he mentioned, because I expressed to him that I was so thankful that I went to the NACO conference because I had the unexpected benefit of learning about the value of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act investments and the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically on broadband, but also more holistically. He mentioned that on funding, that in addition to that federal funding and states' role, and that he continues to feel or see evidence that we're behind state-wise, but you'll be able to enlighten me on that, that Amazon is making investments in Tillamook County all up Highway 6, that they're funding the additional access. They were like, yes, we can do that. I didn't write down anything, so I don't have any particular, I know he told me things that I don't remember now about what they were paying for. But I said, well, hopefully it won't just end at the dividing line between the two counties. I said, so please let us know. I said, but Commissioner Willie probably knows all that part. So anyway, that's the mention.
I think Matt will probably end on this a little bit too, but yeah, Amazon has become a player. Some of it not in a good way.
I'll add that today we're providing you a relatively high level grounding and refresher, but when we come back to you with the full report, we anticipate providing some priority areas, an assessment of the different types of funding available and what would be required. So we look forward to going more in the weeds with you on the infrastructure opportunities.
Oh, I hope I have the capacity to understand all of that, all the different types of weeds. So at the outset, let me make sure I'm reiterating my goals. Given the long-term nature benefit of this infrastructure investment, I want to make sure that we, Washington County, are maximizing the opportunity. But I want every county here in our state to be able to maximize the opportunity. And if I haven't been clear about that, and it means that I don't need to understand. I don't really truly, this is one of those areas where what I believe I need to understand is I need to understand what tools staff needs to reach those big audacious goals.
Mhm.
But this is one area where I'm concerned my brain doesn't have the breadth and the depth to do another big thing. So just be clear with me about what you need and then go do.
The
Please.
download and the upload, that's what we. need.
Yep, okay, that part I got, that part I got, but also the bead, the
Yeah.
access,
Oh, yeah.
so
Mhm.
I'm at the high level concerns.
And to respond to this conversation, Chair Harrington, thank you. And I hope that you see this throughout this presentation. One of the common themes here is about partnerships. Use the example of a private company partnering with Tillamook County, our partners to the west, in providing broadband to their community. Broadband, whether it's infrastructure development, as it is in that case, or closing digital divide, is all about partnerships. And there's, as you'll see in this study, in this presentation, as we continue on this journey, you'd see that there's a real opportunity for the county to provide leadership around those partnerships, whether it's bringing together folks to go after a grant application or working across anchor institutions like libraries, school districts, and others to be connecting different communities within our county to broadband services and training devices and things like that. So it's terrific. Let me jump back into our timeline here. So in September of 2021, your board approved the first tranche of ARPA funds, which has enabled this study that we're working on here. And like I said, we are wrapping up the study now and are here today to talk about key findings and potential next steps. And like Dorian mentioned, we would look forward to coming back to your board after you've had a chance to read the few hundred pages of the study in May or June to talk about next steps in this whole portfolio of work. So next slide, Chair Harrington, we know that you appreciate a timeline. This is a very basic one. Please excuse how basic it is here, but we just for the public, we worked on the Colpack study, which wrapped up in 2022. We're just wrapping up that broadband study now, Countywide study. I think it's back to you, Dorian.
Sure. So a bit of a refresher. This is the first time that we're coming back to you with an update here. The investment strategy that we've been working on, culminating in that final report that we look forward to bringing you. Really here, we were looking to identify technical systems needs, evaluate differences in access and affordability. We know that just because there are lines in the ground, that doesn't necessarily mean that folks have internet access. We also wanted to set the table for multi-government partnerships. So to your point, Chair Harrington, we've been meeting with staff across jurisdictions, our local cities, as well as in the state. And finally, really the primary goal here is to prepare local governments to apply for funding. So really this was a fact-finding mission for us to understand the landscape in Washington County and what we may be able to viably go after in terms of the federal funds that's available. And this was a partnership we contracted with both Echo Northwest and Uptown Services to provide capacity and the technical assistance needed to complete this in-depth project. Next slide. I would be remiss not to mention again that this was not just an infrastructure project. We really took a trifecta approach in understanding infrastructure, access, and affordability. And obviously these things are deeply intertwined and all three matter for a household's ability to access the internet at home. But these are some of the factors, areas of exploration that you'll see in the forthcoming report. Next slide, please.
So that means I don't have to understand all this today?
No, absolutely not. This is a refresher, a regrounding. We'll come back to you with more high-level information, definitions, and key findings. We wanted the opportunity to reground on this topic, get direction from you, reaffirm that we should continue to be doing this work as staff, and identify what question areas that you have so that we're prepared to come back with exactly the information you want to see next time, understanding that it's a very rich topic area.
Can we go back one slide?
Mhm.
Yes.
Because one of the things that, oh, I see. I was looking for it under affordability. One of the learnings from that NACO conference was we did this leap from you access the internet from your computer to you access it on your smartphones. But one of the aspects that I learned was that we need to redouble our efforts because smartphones aren't enough. There need to, and so there was a big emphasis on Chromebooks. And that it isn't enough to have one computer in a household with children, that there need to be multiple devices, one per kid and one for the parents. And if it's a household with grandparents too, the grandparents need their own as well. And so part of what I perhaps erroneously understood is funding to enable not only the training to use devices, but also to acquire devices, or at least there's partnership opportunities for that. So at first, I was only looking at the blue one, reliance on smartphones rather than computers, versus in the purple, presence/absence of computer at home. So okay, this is exploration. In a way, I need a similar version of this slide as opportunities or actions. Right?
Our findings and the
Yeah,
proposed action.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Yes,
following.
absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought up really multiple different components of this chart, because what you heard at the national level at NACO really reflects what we heard in part of the interview component of this project, where staff met with community-based organizations about what is the experience in Washington County, and it does reflect what you're speaking to.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that the two of you and the wider team are engaged on this. Just so pleased. Thank you.
Great. I think I have a question on this. I think something the chair mentioned to help me. And I think I heard from the chair, like the education piece of the access, but I don't know how how we could uplift that, because the digital literacy, it's real thing. And how do you know, and to your point about the digital gap, and I think that was one thing we heard from Senator Ron Wyden meeting that Commissioner Jerry Willey was in that conversation. But one thing we heard was kept repeating the digital age gap. That was like weaved in his talking points, where it was part of his conversation, you know, like he wasn't reading any notes or anything. But so how do we uplift the digital literacy on part of the access in terms of education?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Fye. We will be talking about that within this, and that's a key part of the story here. That's a key part of the story is, and one of the points that I'll make one of the next slides is when we talk about broadband, naturally the next step is to talk about infrastructure. Okay, well, we need the fiber in the ground, but that's only part of the story. Chair Harrington, you mentioned that the story that was told at NACO about that's only that first step. It's really having those devices, having the appropriate devices, having the skills, and having the training, which takes a lot when you talk about different communities. There is an age gap. There is a gap with communities of color, which we've shown actually in our data. That gap exists here within Washington County. And so there's a lot of work to do. And again, it comes back to those partnerships with community organizations and others that can help do that training, do that device lending, things like that. So.
Given the interest that you've expressed here today, we'll make sure that some of the findings, including the demographic information and the proposed action items based on that data, are in the follow-up presentation that we provide you. All right, brief summary overview of the different types of methods that we used. Again, we wanted to understand all of the different facets of broadband in the county, and we employed a variety of different ways to gather information to answer these questions. So we did a countywide survey of broadband users, both online and in person on paper, understanding that you're not going to click on an online survey. So we did have an intern go out to our county libraries as well. We did a full demographic assessment, race, gender, age, presence of children in the household, and other variables I'll be happy to show next time. Obviously a geospatial element, really wanting to map across the county areas that are lacking infrastructure, as well as other variables that have to do with affordability and access. We did interviews with technical staff across jurisdictions, as well as with community organizations to understand the lived experiences of folks throughout the county. And finally, this really culminated in a funding opportunity assessment. So collecting all of the data that we gathered from all of these different sources, all of these aspects of the research, we plan to bring to you next time an assessment of the different funding options, strategies that you may consider going after if your board directs us to do so. So that'll be part of the deliverable. So these are all of the areas that we've been hard at work in. Oh, go ahead,
I
Commissioner.
have a
Reese.
question. Included in this list, did you talk with school districts, school?
Some schools.
Some school districts, we did have some connections. When we did the local jurisdiction interviews, so we're interviewing, as Dorian said, technical staff at most of the cities in Washington County, we were able to include a few school districts. So the Banks School District and I think the Beaverton School District as well.
Good,
So,
thank you.
mhm.
Including those staff that have multicultural expertise
That's right.
as well,
right.
specifically in serving marginalized communities.
I'm wondering, I feel like this should focus more, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. I feel like your assessment should have focused on more of the rural side because the infrastructure does exist within.
Let me
Oh,
get into that in the
okay.
next slide.
I hold on?
Clarify, yes.
That's a really good question.
About that,
All right.
yes, yeah, thank you. Ready to to
Go ahead,
slide?
yeah.
So, and Commissioner Fowler, you're bringing up a good point. This is the tip of iceberg with a very big topic that's very complex. And one of the reasons why we're here as this is finally getting wrapped up is, like I said, I think there's 7 appendices to this thing. There's a lot of analysis that was done. So we want to make sure that everyone on the board has time to review and digest that, and we'll come back. I'd be happy to answer a lot more of those detailed questions, but you're getting to one of the key stories here, Commissioner Fye, about broadband in Washington County. So let me go through, these are kind of themes. These are the grouped key findings here. And I just want to kind of talk about each one of these. And then we'd be happy to answer some questions.
Please, because when I looked at this in preparation for today, I was like, I must not understand it at all
Sure,
because this is unlike anything I expected.
sure. There's a lot to unpack here. So let's take these one by one. So the first kind of theme that came out of some of this work is that local city priorities for broadband varies. So again, we worked with local cities to understand how they approach broadband, what assets they had in place, what other institutions or organizations that they work with. And this analysis really showed that there's this broad range. We have communities like Hillsborough and Sherwood that have a really robust, holistic approach to broadband. We talk about device lending programs, digital navigation training, connections to the local library system. These are some of the leading cities. Other cities don't have as much capacity, or I might not have kind of the staff to work on that. And so again, coming back to thinking about partnerships and the county's ability to be a leader, there's a real opportunity here for us to work with some of those more advanced cities and help partner with some other cities that could use that support. One of the deliverables that comes out of this work is, what do they call it? A cross-jurisdictional partnership framework that really lays that out together. And you'll see when this arrives in your inbox, there's a one-pager, there's a cut sheet for each city within Washington County, which talks about kind of where they are within their broadband journey, where their city council has placed priorities on broadband, what assets they might have in place. And that's tied into a framework about how we might work together across jurisdictions, given their local context, to help them achieve their broadband goals.
I might be oversimplifying this. Okay, but here's my idea may be oversimplified. There is, I think of this as, this is once in a lifetime funding opportunity, right? So there's scenario 1 that is the highest level possible. scenario number 2 is the target where we want everybody to absolutely have the opportunity of. Notice I did not use the word minimum, right? What we have today is the unacceptable minimum. I'm trying to ensure that we are working with all of our jurisdictional partners so that there is a common definition of, I can't remember the label that I used for this is where we want everybody to have access to, and that we make sure that happens. The fact that there are others who have additional resources to get here or are already here or whatever is great. But I feel the responsibility to make sure that we get everybody here. And there may be steps above that, don't get me wrong, but I'm having trouble I don't yet understand how we make this happen. And that's what I'm anxious to do, right? I was anxious as a result of that trip for us to hurry up because other places in the country are ahead of us and counties across the nation are already ahead of us and we have to play catch up or we're going to be totally left behind. And I don't want us to be left behind here.
While I did characterize this as a fact-finding mission, I do think we really did set the table and kind of convening and collaborating and really getting a sense of where each jurisdiction is at. And what we didn't want to do was provide you this massive report and just plunk it into your lap without some grounding. But we're very happy to go through what we found with each jurisdiction.
My ability to absorb is what I think is the long lead item here. Do you feel like you've got something that will help me get this picture?
Yes.
I think that we do. And I think that's part of the strategy. So the strategy, and this is one of our next slides here, Chair Harrington, is and I'll get to this in just a second, but the strategy ties together all of the different things that we could do. Because again, right, with a complex issue like getting universal broadband across the county and making it, as you were saying, ensuring that everybody within the community has access, takes multiple interventions, multiple actions in different ways. This is a wonderful conversation around, well, what type of device do you have access to? Do you have the skills to use that device? Is that device in a language that you speak, that you understand? And so all of those things take different types of partnerships and opportunities, investments to start closing those gaps. And so the strategy at the core of it is a framework to be thinking about different actions that the county can take and partners can take, and where there's leadership opportunities for us. So let me jump into just these key findings, and then we'll jump to that slide next, where we can talk about some of those buckets of actions. And I hope that it starts to kind of demystify and kind of pull apart the complexity of how the county might pursue this. You know, the second bullet point, I want to jump ahead actually to the third bullet point. So the second bullet point, countywide, there's unequal access to affordable broadband. That's super important, but let's jump ahead to infrastructure for a second here. So the infrastructure opportunity in Washington County, as it relates to the federal dollars that are coming through the state, really is an opportunity in the rural part of the county. The way that BEAD funding and some of the other funding buckets are arriving, and the way that the eligibility looks like, it is focused on rural areas. So incorporated Washington County within the metro's urban growth boundary is by and large not eligible for BEAD funding for infrastructure. This map that you see here shows areas that are potentially eligible, with the purple areas, the kind of darker areas being what the consultants identified as really target areas. So areas where there's larger populations in these rural areas, where we've demonstrated through some of the testing that they did that there aren't modern speeds, there isn't modern technology, broadband technology. And so, and there's a whole section on this within the study that says, you know, if and when you go after BEAD funding, here is your best shot. These are the areas that are
So I
eligible
think
for those
that's,
dollars.
that's one of my mistakes. I thought BEAD is what enabled the monthly subscription.
I think you're referring to ACP, the Affordable
ACP.
Connectivity Program.
Thank
And this,
you.
and Chair Harrington, this is really pointing out the complexity because there's a number of different, I had to ask the consultant team a number of times too. There's a number of different agencies that are providing funding. There's a number within each agency, there are different buckets. When it comes to infrastructure, BEAD is by and large, the
Yeah.
primary source that is coming out of the federal government through the state's broadband office for infrastructure.
So
That's-
what I am getting from this map is that the middle mile
Mhm.
access and I assume last mile access is available in the urban areas and then some, because I think that gray area, this one is even bigger than our urban areas.
Whether it's, it is largely available is the way I think we should define that.
Okay.
It is largely available, which prohibits, which makes us ineligible to pursue infrastructure dollars for those
Okay,
areas.
okay, okay, now I understand the chart because of my mistakes, earlier mistakes. Got it.
There are other opportunities I will mention for infrastructure. Like I said, there's a number of different agencies and it's really interesting. You know, the federal government, the USDA actually just released Community Connect dollars, which is focused on broadband infrastructure. Actually, the application window is open right now. It's a much smaller amount than BEAD funding. But there are multiple buckets that we're looking at. Within the strategy document, there's an assessment of all of these different funding opportunities. It talks about, you know, how they're funded, who's eligible, what the application criteria is, how might we pursue an application there.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to that second bullet point here, and this is a really key point that that we want to make. And Chair Harrington, I think this gets to your question. The analysis that we did in this study really showed that even in areas that are served by physical infrastructure, accessibility and affordability challenges remain, especially among BIPOC and low-income households. So this is really important. Again, when we think about broadband, we naturally jump towards infrastructure. That's only a small part of the full story. Our analysis, which included this countywide study, countywide survey and demographic analysis, showed that the lack of affordability is the primary reasons that households go without internet within Washington County. It showed that households commonly undersubscribe to internet services to save money, and the average monthly costs are much higher than many households in our community can afford. So as we continue on this journey, we encourage you to keep in mind that an equitable approach to closing the digital divide in Washington County is not just about infrastructure development, but to programs and services, like you had mentioned, Commissioner Fye, to underserved communities, in particular communities of color within the county's urban areas.
Yep.
The last bullet point there is around leadership and collaboration. Again, getting to this theme of partnership. Washington County could really use a leader, a regional champion to act as a convener and a liaison with the state as an information clearinghouse, to work with community-based organizations and other partners in strategy implementation. So again, I think this highlights the importance of the county's role and how the county can play that role in developing partnerships. So as a side note, your board's leadership in considering the dedication of ARPA funds for this study and for continued county capacity is a key part of us being able to serve our community and to continue to support our partners. So thank you for your leadership there.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So when I first saw this map and the description you have out to the right, I thought the gray hashtag areas to the left there, I thought those would be BEAD qualified because they don't have access.
Those could potentially be BEAD qualified. The part of the layering here, Commissioner Willie, is about where we have concentrations of population. And so where it would be feasible if we're going to put a middle mile line, are there enough households there to make it feasible? So let's look at the one in the Gaston area. In the Gaston area, there's also the community of Cherry Grove near Hag Lake and areas towards Farmington. So that was an area that they said this will rise up in an application packet with BEAD, because not only does it meet the rural criteria, but there's a significant households within that area. Areas to the west of that we could consider to pursue that. A lot of that is timberland. There's less households there, and so it'd be if you're stringing a lot of wire, it's not cheap, and it would become more prohibitive.
Isn't this why, I can't remember which sessions, I think I may have only been in, we met with Wyden. This is where there was a presentation that talked about, it isn't just about wires, it may be cellular towers, not necessarily cellular, but that there are vendors who do want to serve that gray hatched area. We just have to get the RFPs out there and they will respond. And our county colleagues who are presenting were saying, we have those RFPs. So I can't remember if it was South Dakota and the Commonwealth of Virginia, or if it was just South Dakota, because there was the Dakota one, there was the Maryland one, and there was the Commonwealth of Virginia one.
We'd be happy to review with definitions next time, some of the differences in technology between
Oh, I'm not trying to
fiber
be an
or
expert, don't
satellite.
worry. That's-
Oh,
that's
no,
a
it's a
whole
wonderful
realm.
question.
That's a whole realm. I do not want to
Different
dive into.
strategies make sense
rather-
for different geographies is the
rather
bottom
make sure
line.
you have access to them. I heard a huge invitation. We figured a bunch of this out. Here's your intro to it. Follow up with us.
Yes.
Well, as far as your cost, this goes way back when I first started with Colpac, but the statistic that 80% of the cost will 80% of the cost will spend in getting it out into those rural areas out there. 20% we can do probably in the BEAD projects side of things. So yeah.
So there's a lot more data in the study, is what I'll say. And again, the purple areas, I think that's the place to start. That's the place to start if we were to look at BEAD funding specifically for rural Washington County.
I have a question about would that map correlate with the broadband map?
That's a terrific question. So when you mentioned broadband map, you're referring to the FCC's broadband map of areas that are served.
We were introduced to all that back in
And challenging it. and-
AOC.
Mapping.
Yeah, the mapping one.
Yeah.
So would that go ahead, answer.
Yeah, terrific question, and it overlaps. And so for everyone's benefit here, the FCC has maps that talks about areas that are served and servable and not served. And historically, the maps have been not that great, I think I can say. And there's been a number of different challenges or opportunities also to challenge those maps so that those areas can become eligible for funding. So there are a couple different ways, and I won't go too deep here, just being thoughtful of time, but there's a couple of different ways that those maps can be challenged. One of them is called a fabric challenge, and that thinks about kind of the fabric of the landscape. Where are there houses? Where are there businesses? Where are there serviceable locations? The Broadband Office, the state of Oregon, just pursued a fabric challenge. We participated in that. We were in touch with them, made sure that they had the data for Washington County, and so we've submitted on part of that. As part of the BEAD application, the other part of the challenge is around availability. And so that gets to the question of speed and affordability. And some of the analysis that we pursued during this study is set up specifically to help with those challenges, to say, well, look, this area says that it's served, it says that it's getting these download speeds. We did speed tests across Washington County, and we have the data. That was one of the goals of this study, is to have that data to be ready for that challenge.
I also just recently learned that you could actually request a speed test. I had no idea because
Yeah.
yeah, like I was just unaware because I have my personal aside work phone is with Verizon, and there's no coverage. And I could request Verizon to come and actually test the area and figure out what the problem. Yeah. I hadn't realized that was
Need to get the app.
not the app.
Okay.
They can actually come and
two
test
apps.
because the app
Mhm.
it's different. Not besides the app, because there's
Mhm.
the neighborhood problem.
Mhm.
They can, so
Great.
it's my to-do list.
Perfect.
Pay for.
Yeah, terrific. Let's move to here, this one of our last slides here. We just have a few more. And this, Chair Harrington, I hope starts to put together, again, that framework, those buckets of how we might think about approaching this complex problem. So the strategy talks about a number of different themes, number of different goal areas that the county and partners can pursue to get to universal access, affordable access. And so the buckets you can see on the slide here: remove barriers to broadband deployment, promote infrastructure development and funding, excuse me, improve broadband access, affordability, and digital inclusion, and provide regional leadership. So latticed into these four buckets are a number of different actions and interventions that altogether make this portfolio of how we can get at making sure that everyone in Washington County has access to affordable internet. So I'll list a few of these here. There are, of course, more of them that are tied together quite well within the strategy document. So when we come back, we can start to unpack some of the other ones. But go ahead, Chair
Before
Herndon.
you do that, can we go back to the prior slide?
Yes.
I have assumed that we may be able to, with this funding opportunity, we may be able to achieve that in the gray and the purple crosshatch, but maybe not in the gray crosshatch. Is that a really bad assumption? Right, I have this goal of everybody, but I try to be pragmatic, but I'm making an assumption.
This focuses primarily on infrastructure needs. And so that's part of why we wanted to more accurately capture the narrative that it's not just infrastructure.
Yes, I understand
So
that. But if I just think about the infrastructure,
in terms of federal guidelines for availability, yes, with a couple of caveats.
okay, I don't need to know the details today. I just was trying to prepare my heart in a way. So I'm with
That's
you.
fair.
Onward to slide 13.
Terrific. I think slide 13, slide 12. Real
Oh,
quick
got it.
here. Let me talk about some of these actions, some of these interventions, just to give you a color of what they're like. So here's just a few. So under remove barriers to broadband deployment, we can think about dig once policies. So this encourages the placement of fiber conduit anytime a road or a trench is dug up. Definitely within promote infrastructure and development of funding. We were talking about middle mile, this conversation about Western Washington County in particular. Building partner capacity to integrate broadband programs and services into their existing program. So much like we led here thinking about how broadband is public health. This is part of public health. It is the super determinant within the social determinants of health. And so partnering with local cities, school districts, the library system, and community-based organization is going to get to that very important, crucial digital inclusion piece. Alongside that, digital skills training and device distribution. Yes, it's great that we can do a lot of things on our phone. It's really hard to do an application for a job completely on your phone. You need that Chromebook. You need some other kind of device where you can sit and type out your answers there. Awareness and outreach, Chair Harrington, you brought up the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's well funded with a couple of the bills that were passed through the federal government recently. It's not well utilized. And so there's a lack of awareness and also support that folks need to be able to connect to that. So it's there's an opportunity there. And then also thinking about this leadership piece, dedicating county capacity to participate in regional state initiatives. The state is going to be launching a digital equity plan next year. We're keeping our eye on that. We'd be very interested in participating, thinking about what that looks like here within the county. And so that's a real opportunity. So that's just a few of those interventions.
The part where you mentioned awareness and utilization of ACP,
Right.
that is where in that presentation, one of the jurisdictions talked about there are like 3 or 4 steps. You have to get a number and then you have to go apply that number, blah, blah, blah. It was like, oh, darn. So people who may be struggling with language, or we all only get the same 24 hours in a day. So they're already with busy family and we're asking them to go
Mhm.
through how many steps?
Mhm.
So, yeah, okay. I'm sensitized now. I'm looking for what we need to invest in
Perfect.
or empower you to do. Great things can happen.
And so just the strategy also talks about an assessment of all these different funding opportunities. So we have talked about this a little bit today. So and there's multiple funding opportunities within broadband, infrastructure development, technical assistance, subsidies, and community outreach.
So do we just need to give you 4 or 5 thumbs up and go forth and prosper, or there's some really hard nuts to crack here?
The thumbs up is very welcome. Yeah. And I think we can talk about some of the strategy pieces, embedded within all of this, of course, our policy choices about how we use our limited capacity.
Okay,
So
darn. Homework.
I will say, as a side note here to this slide, I have been in touch with staff at the state's broadband office and was able to kind of show them some of the data that we have showed, and they were very impressed, I will say. And so I want to thank the board again for your leadership in providing the resources and direction for this study. They said that we are in the leading edge of counties actually in the state of Oregon and thinking about considering and moving towards a broadband for everyone. So we're very excited about that.
I'll feel better when I know how we compare to those counties that presented.
On that, yeah, outside of Oregon.
Terrific. And just actually one more side note too, there is a movement in the state capitol right now within the legislature. There's HB 32.1. I won't get all the details of that. And GR's report from Friday, there was an update. I know Erin Doyle is here as well if you have specific questions, but she provided an update on HB 32.01, which is designed to help the state and local jurisdictions get the full chart of dollars that are coming out of the federal government for broadband. So we're tracking that.
So here's another concern that I've had, and I'm not sure that I've articulated it yet. I'm afraid somewhere hidden in each of these programs is a local match requirement that we are going to be hard pressed to meet. Are they lurking there?
There are local match requirements for most of the programs, including BEAD. Our understanding is that there are some ways to lessen that local match, but in general, it is a local match requirement. And so I think that is where an opportunity for partnership also arises. Thinking about opportunities for multiple institutions, agencies to chip in.
I thought local match is only for transportation.
Nice try.
Perfect. Well, I know that we're over time here. So just to wrap up and talk about some of the next steps that we're working on, we are actively engaging with local cities and organizations to lay the foundation for potential partnerships. So we have a number of deliverables that multi-jurisdictional partnership framework that I talked about that we can use to go and talk with each of the cities within Washington County about what we found, provide them with the data from this study, and help think about either partnership or how we can support them in their broadband goals. Assessing and considering immediate and near-term funding opportunities. Again, we're keeping our eye on BEAD specifically, but also the ACP and other funding opportunities. So we're trying to be prepared for those. And then preparing to leverage the county's ARPA funding to advance broadband efforts. So again, thank you to the board for your leadership in thinking about funding for this study and considering ARPA funds to continue to provide capacity for this important work. And so that's what we have for you today. And it's, bless you.
Is Commissioner Rogers with us?
Yes, he has been with us for the last about 15 minutes.
Great. Welcome, Commissioner Rogers. The rest of us have had the opportunity to ask questions along the way. And before we dive into opening the floor to all of the 4 of your colleagues here around the table, do you have any questions at this juncture? Or why don't you kick us off with any comments as well?
Well, thank you. And Matt, I'm sorry I had to run back, do some eye maintenance, but I only heard a part of it. I had a chance to review your materials. They look good, and I'm very supportive. This is the future, honestly. And so I don't have any questions. Just keep up the work. I also share the issue of funds. Are we going to be required to put a lot of matching in? I think that's a great question. That was the only one I had as well. And I think it's important that we understand what our obligations are. But beyond that, I really don't have anything.
Rogers.
Other commissioners?
I think that I think you're doing a good job of taking all the different component parts and putting them together for the best outcome. And that's the bottom line here. The funding is going to be an interesting piece and how that ties in. But to know how much we have to fund, we have to know what our need is, and we have to be able to identify those opportunities too. So I'm just waiting for the next shoe. Good work.
Commissioner Bai, Commissioner Willie?
Go ahead.
Yeah, good work. I would say, this is all interested. I think I was joking with you if you were going to bring Wi-Fi earlier. Good job. I think you brought very well prepared material. And one thing that caught my eye, and it's related to the next topic that we're going to talk about after you all, is the local match. You know, the next project we're going to talk about, we're having a conversation about, is it even feasible for other jurisdictions to match this? And where is everyone stand? So I think once you approach cities and local jurisdictions with your conversation, maybe there's no surprise, because I was surprised that there is a local match. And I appreciate the chair mentioning that, because I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah, no, the only thing I just appreciate your collaboration with COPAC and the work that we're doing this in tandem. So thank you for that. And this is great information. And as far as funding and the match, well, let's go get the money and then we'll figure out the match.
You should have that same attitude with the TV Highway Steering Committee then.
Their ask is a little bigger.
Well, given the teeing up of this being once in a lifetime, and if we blow this, we're blowing it for generations, you might be right on that score. I appreciate everyone's patience and tolerance as I reveal my unease in understanding this. But the root of it really is that theme of that digital availability, certainly what we've experienced through the COVID pandemic and what can happen out into the future. I also think that from a natural hazard standpoint, knowing that the Cascadia earthquake is looming perhaps sometime over this next 50 years, and we saw how neighborhoods in New Jersey and New York responded to hurricanes years ago, and access to power and people being able to somewhat go about their lives as long as they had their phones. But they needed power up of their phones. Anyway, that's a total rat hole. My apologies. The one thing, I know I have a lot to look forward to, but there's one thing that I don't quite understand. And I thank you for participating in the upcoming Chair Mayor's meeting. I'm back to my virtual whiteboard here in the timeline. With all we have to sort through, in addition to current business, between now and the end of June, I am voicing that I'm concerned about my mental capacity to absorb it and make thoughtful decisions. And that includes with, community engagement. We have a lot going on. So what I don't understand on my virtual whiteboard, right, with the line of time is for some of these things we have to figure out. And this is awesome, really level setting for me, catching me up to everything you've done. Well, now I'm like, okay, how can I be brave and go forth and ensure that staff has the tools that they need in order to do the job that I really want us to be successful in doing? I don't know if what we're talking about are investment discussions that I need to go through post-June and into that calendar Q3 or beyond, calendar Q4 or into next year. But what President Biden and his administration has convinced me that this is a train, not only that we're going to be on, right? But we're going to be successful. I want us to be successful in that race of competing with all the other states and counties. I want my county, Washington County, to connect up with all the other counties in Oregon. So it does, I'm an Oregonian, so that every child, every adult, every senior across our whole state has the opportunity to thrive. And I'm not smart enough yet to have confidence that I'm going to be on the journey with you versus be a boat anchor holding us all back in that decision making. That's the confidence I'm trying to get you. I have confidence in you. Commissioner Willie, will you prop my thumb up when it needs to prop up at the right times?
I think we're on the train. We're gonna get there. So
Okay.
yeah,
I
it's
think
just
we'll all
trying
be
to
sales,
trying
not
to-
anchors.
keep up with all the technical stuff.
That's why I'm saying we've got you guys and I'm very trusting of that. So.
Yeah, thank
Do
you
we
for
have to
that.
clear some of the rolling agenda decks for you to get what you need out of us?
I'll let Matt answer any specific timing questions, but let me say, I'm just going to answer, we don't know yet. But if we do, if there's something timely, I think what we've heard is that this is a priority. And so we will need to look at those rolling agendas when the funding comes out and when we need a decision, but we don't need that yet.
Oh, but our June roundtable, we can add it to our board initiatives.
So
That's a confidence builder for me.
Okay.
what I have heard from your board is, yes, we have roundtables, and at any point staff feel we need to extend a meeting, have a special meeting for a pressing item to bring that forward to you, Madam Chair, to have that discussion about scheduling. So staff hear that. We hear, also have heard through the ARPA conversations and especially after your trip to NACO, the urgency and not wanting to miss this opportunity. We hear that, so we're being mindful. We are not at a point to bring forward what that looks like in a timeline, but
Yeah.
please be assured, if there's a need, we will come forward with that.
Okay.
And that's why we're having the conversation today
Yep.
ahead of the report,
Yeah.
because we are getting ready.
Okay.
So we can be ready.
I feel really good about it. We are going to succeed together.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you for getting me to the point I needed to get at for today. Thank
Great.
you. Good
Thank you.
job. Wowie zowie, I'm thrilled. Hey, H, happy dance.
So let's see if this next group can get you.
Yeah,
excited.
We're gonna put broadband cables and fiber under the road now, right? We're trying.
That's a great opportunity.
Commissioner Rogers, do you have the updated presentation through our packet?
I do not have this. I'm gonna have to close this. I have to go back in.
I'm sorry, I think I do,
Great.
yeah, I think I do. Thanks.
We're all
Yeah, it's on
taking the
video.
moment to make sure we have it.
It's the last item on there. LUT put together a PowerPoint slide, so it's the last attachment in the packet that's updated.
Thank you.
Number 6 now.
Yes, the new number 6.
But look at that. Great. Take it away.
Okay.
Steve.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I'm Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director. I'm here with Chris Deffelbach, our Senior Policy Analyst, and Aaron Wardell, our Planning and Development Services Manager. And I think Diami Valentine's also online for now, but may need to off at some point. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Diami for his work on the technical team that's working on this project. And he's been invaluable to us as we're trying to help shape our own thinking about this and help inform your upcoming decision-making process on this. And so we appreciated Commissioner Fye bringing up some of the questions that are being posed to the steering committee at a meeting this week. And the key question that's before the committee, the steering committee at this point, is really looking at what options do we think can be left behind at this point, and which options do we want to carry forward for additional analysis. And so the agenda for that meeting is framed around a series of questions. And so we've actually just put together a quick presentation to sort of walk through those and some staff thinking on those to help inform a discussion here and help inform Commissioner Fye's participation in that steering committee meeting later this week. So with that, I think I'll turn to Erin and she's going to go ahead and walk us through, and then we're all here to help answer any questions that you have.
So as Stephen said, we went through the materials for the steering committee meeting on Thursday and put together these slides pretty quickly. So these are the questions that the steering committee is going to be asked, and we'll walk through some staff responses to these. So the first question is, any clarifying questions from the committee on the cost or ratings updates? Are there any scenarios that you believe can be dismissed at this point? What contextual project information or analysis will be necessary in order to the steering committee to get to a locally preferred alternative recommendation? And then what this final question is getting at, it's phrased a little bit unusually, is if the preferred scenario is only for a segment of the corridor, what would it take to get to agreement on just funding a part of the entire corridor? So we'll talk about these again as we go through the presentation and revisit that last one. So the objectives for the steering committee are to work towards selecting a locally preferred alternative by this fall, the fall of 2023. The timeline is framed around including that in the regional transportation plan, which Metro will be taking action on later this year as well. We'll then be positioned to move into project development and start preparing for local match. So what commitments do the jurisdictions and the partners need to make in order to make this project a reality? So this slide is showing the entire corridor, and what it's communicating through the colored oblong circles, the ovals, are which stations would have cross-section changes in the roads and which stations would have less intensive improvements. And so the gold colored ones are the ones that would have the cross-section changes. So what this is really communicating is that there are a lot of transit stops along the entire TV highway corridor, and a large number of those would need to have pretty extensive improvements in order to be a bus rapid transit project.
So part of what I know I'm not alone in this, so I'll just say some of us are struggling with is this narrowing down, if I can use, if it's appropriate for me to use that word. We really want to ensure that we have planned what would it take to do the whole corridor in I guess a BRT scenario. I'm oversimplifying and maybe using the wrong words. we understand that there's only limited funding from time to time. So we're trying to separate out having a plan from having a funding strategy or approach.
Mhm.
And so which are we doing? Or are we at cross purpose?
So we're getting to that point of making
Okay.
that decision, right? About what would that alternative look like? And once you've made the choice about what the alternative is, you can figure out the funding piece and how we get to the funding that we need for the project. So we'll start talking about what the various scenarios will look like, but this is just showing how extensive this corridor is and how many improvements will be needed to improve the full corridor.
But do I still have open to me the option to say, no, plan the whole thing? So the alternative is the whole thing, but I understand we can only fund a segment of it.
At this time, right, there could be a temporal aspect. So this is going to be captured, I think, in the
Okay.
scenarios as
All
we
right.
walk through them. So
Got it.
Can you go, just go back one though,
Mhm.
but you were pointing out all the yellow stations with cross-section change.
Mhm.
I thought when we were talking about a BRT, we were talking about less stops. And so not every one of those would come into play if we're talking about a BRT, is it? I mean, is the bus going to stop at every one of those?
No, this is the current.
So that's part of the decision as well. So when they move to determining the project development phase, they'll decide exactly how many stations there will be. So this is an
This is
idea.
the largest maximum extent. We have to narrow it down to. And
We could, right?
Appreciable.
And I think that'll be a big part of the decision making as well, is how much do we narrow down the number of stops along TV Highway? Because that is something we need to talk to the community about as well,
Mhm.
right? And so that's a big part of the decision making process.
Okay.
So the scenarios are the next couple of slides. So scenario one would be a full corridor bus rapid transit improvement similar to what has been built on Division in Portland. So this has the articulated buses that provide for more capacity for passengers. It has level boarding. The stations are really nice with all of the upgraded amenities, and there are associated improvements around each of those station areas. So this is, I think, what everyone would really like to get out of this project, is improvements for this entire corridor. And that's what this scenario is. Now,
I'm sorry, but I had a little trouble with that description because it may have been the change in names, but as a Metro counselor, we cut off that part that went from whatever is now the current terminus to Hood Community College, Mount Hood Community College.
mhm.
So that's why I have a little trouble with
That-
Kinwit.
Right, I'm just trying to communicate what the stations look like, right? So it's that
Oh.
type of bus and that
Okay,
kind of station improvement. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, because that project it's a great project, and it certainly has done a lot for amenities for passengers and made that a really pleasant transit opportunity for the east side of Portland. But it's not the same as bus rapid transit that you would experience elsewhere in the world if you were to travel on a BRT line. It's not a dedicated
Yeah, yeah.
lane just for transit. It doesn't run like a rail line on wheels. So what we're really talking about here is more of a BRT light or a tactical transit solution.
I'm sorry to ask you to go back, but I'm confused about what Small Starts project means. I thought I knew, but now I don't think I do.
So a small starts project is a specific federal transit program. And it has to do, it's called small because it has to do with the amount of money. It's not necessarily small, it's still hundreds of millions of dollars, but it's distinguished from a new starts project, which is the higher dollar amount of federal transit money or transportation.
It's not about point A to point B.
Correct. It's the name of the funding program.
And
right?
so it is, okay.
It
And
is
they all-
influenced by how you designed it, the length and everything in between.
The work that's
all- it
being
looks
done.
like all of these fit under the small.
Correct. All the work that's been done to date has been around the parameters of the federal small starts program.
thank
So they're not pursuing a new
Thank you.
starts program. That would kick us into an entirely different funding program and different qualifications for that.
And New Starts is the program that's used for most of the light rail projects, the much bigger scale
Okay.
projects.
Right.
have to be half in exclusive right away for new starts, and they're bigger, and you get more money for new starts.
This is like a
taps out.
renovation.
This is a smaller.
If we were looking to totally reconstruct TV Highway, and have full-blown BRT, we'd be new starts.
Okay. All right, that helps me. Thank you. I'm.
Start by taking out the railroad.
That could work for the dedicated right of way.
Right.
That's not one of the scenarios we're talking about today, but that could work. So moving through the scenarios, what you're going to see in a few slides are the cost comparisons between these scenarios. And so looking realistically at how much it would cost to do the entire corridor, Metro and TriMet staff have worked together to come up with some alternatives to doing the entire corridor. And so scenario 2 would be that BRT kind of improvement between Hillsborough and Beaverton. There would then be a transition to a regular bus like the line 57 that runs today connecting from Hillsborough to Forest Grove. So
Remember, we went over these the last go around, right?
yes,
Yes.
No planning for that part.
it would
From
not be
Hillsborough to Forest
it would
Grove.
not be a part of the project development. It could still be improved, but it wouldn't be through this project, right? That would be
Okay.
something else if there were improvements
Trying to
made
keep all.
to that piece of it, right? So then there's an option for what's called scenario 2A, which is where the highest level of amenities would be between Hillsborough and Beaverton. But the larger articulated buses would still continue from Hillsborough to Forest Grove. There would not be a transfer. The bus would keep going. And they would have to make some minor station improvements in that Hillsborough to Forest Grove segment so that it could accommodate those larger buses, basically fixing the platforms a little bit, basically making it so it would accommodate the buses, but they wouldn't get any more intensive improvements, at least at this time. So think of this as really just a continuation of the bus itself, but not a continuation of those higher level improvements. So then scenario 2B is similar to 2A in that you would have to transfer, but what this would do is a service planning change. So it would no longer be the line 57 connecting Hillsborough and Forest Grove. It would instead be an extension of line 48, which currently runs along Cornell and connects up to Sunset Transit Center. So it's kind of a service planning scenario. A person would still have to make that transfer, probably right outside the building here in order to get on that.
But it would still be frequent bus.
It would still be frequent bus, yes, but it wouldn't have any of the station amenities or the BRT amenities between the Hillsborough and Forest Grove segment. So then the 3 series of scenarios look at doing the BRT improvements on the west side of the corridor. So only doing those BRT level improvements between Forest Grove and Hillsborough. And in this scenario at the Hillsborough station, riders would need to transfer back to a line 57 regular bus, no bus improvements between Hillsborough and Beaverton under this scenario. Scenario 3A is the flip of scenario 2A, where we would get those BRT level improvements between Forest Grove and Hillsborough, and the nicer buses would continue through the rest of the corridor, but it would be really low level improvements at any of those bus stations along the way, but nicer buses.
Oh, could you go back just for a second? Up to 2, then 2A. So back to 2. So there's still a 2 full, then there's an A and a B.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so got it. So there's a 3, or is there only a 3A?
There's only a 3A.
Okay, so there's no
Yes,
3.
there's no 3B because that wouldn't.
No,
work.
there's no 3.
There is a
There's
3.
Oh, there is a.
There's a 3.
Yeah,
There's not a
There's a
3B.
3A. Okay.
Don't worry, we've got these all together on a slide coming up, and then we'll all get back on the same page about what they
Yeah,
mean.
it's been hard to keep track. I'm with you. No, I just had to get the nomenclature.
And I think that Metro staff did a really great job with the little graphics that go with each
Yes,
of the corridors. Once you have them straight, I think it's a really easy key to use. And so what's communicated on this slide, which combines them all together, is the technical analysis that you have to go to determine if you are eligible for small starts funding. So in order to be eligible, it takes into account a number of factors, but primarily the ridership on the line. So they have to cross that dotted black line that's at about 14 in order to be eligible for this particular funding source. One of the challenges they ran into is that doing this analysis right now means that we're relying on transit ridership primarily during COVID time. Transit ridership during COVID was not super great. And so the numbers don't look as good as they would have looked using, say, the 2018 ridership. So if you look at these bar charts, the hatched part of the bar is using the 2018 ridership. One of the decisions that the steering committee can think through is, do we want to wait a little bit longer and see if ridership recovers?
if we have higher ridership numbers, then our project will score better and will be more competitive.
But the only ones that we are concerned about, isn't it, 2 and 3?
We are eligible under all scenarios.
But the
What-
higher the better.
the higher the better. And so we're barely crossing that line for medium, and really to be competitive, a project should be in medium high. So we could be doing a lot of work in a project that ends up not being really competitive once it gets to the federal level. And we don't know that. Maybe it'll still be really competitive with a medium rating, but it will be more competitive with a medium
So why
high.
isn't there a hashtag information on 3A? Did it not change, or is it?
Yeah, they actually updated their numbers in between the last two meetings, from the last steering committee to the steering committee meeting, and I don't know the reasoning. I think they were adjusting some of the numbers in the background and doing some ridership.
And
work.
this is subject to change. I think
Mhm.
that's a big footnote.
Yeah, there's a
It turns
footnote.
out that FTA has been allowing people to use their 2019 ridership numbers. But evidently this summer, they're gonna update that and maybe some combination
Okay.
of
so-
COVID. So
Sorry,
this is gonna
now I gotta
change.
jump in. So this possibility of quote unquote waiting. We have one deadline, which is the 2023 RTP, right? Adoption by the end of this year. And in order to get this project into it, we at least need to have enough of a draft. I may be going too fast.
The waiting has to do with submitting the small starts grant application. So we can
Okay.
still do all the planning work. We can still move into project development, but we may choose to wait
All right,
until.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm
And as
good.
Chris said, the metrics are changing a little bit on the project team. And so they're trying to keep up with the requirements.
Yep. Okay. Why do I have to choose? Then why do I? Because the difference between the prior presentation, other than further refinements, right? We had a work session on this
Couple weeks.
some recent time.
Mhm.
And so I'm remembering some of this. But what is the forcing function that is forcing the committee and therefore us to provide direction today? The committee to make a decision and for us to provide direction.
It's the fall 2023 deadline per se to include it in the RTP so that it can move into project development.
So I want to still do it all. I still want to do all of them.
When you say you want to do all of them, do you mean you want to study the full corridor? So stick
Yes.
with number one. Not, so we wouldn't necessarily want to do all of them because staff aren't entirely sure that we should pursue all of them. We think the ones that force a transfer may be a problem. That may not be where we want to put our weight.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
okay. I get you. And this is where I then wish I had my bigger version to remember if I want to go from the one where does 2B, if I want to go from Forest Grove to Sunset, what I would do right now,
2A, I think what you meant.
no, it was this one, 2B is what I meant to say. Then if I want to do it today, then I would either go to Hillsborough and hop on light rail, or I would go to Beaverton Transit Center and hop on light rail. So, we haven't affected that. There's still a transfer there, right? But the opportunity, the world of opportunities is having ridden the 57 a whole bunch. It's like two lines squished together. The number of people that ride the full extent from Forest Grove to Aloha, and it really functions as a Beaverton to Hillsborough and a Hillsborough to Forest Grove for the greatest number of people. So I see 2B as having value, even though for some it would still involve a transfer.
Mhm.
But I can't remember all the other lines, which one would involve a transfer.
There's some challenges with the
with the metrics used to determine the qualification for the project, essentially, if we cut off Forest Grove and Cornelius, we lose a lot of the equity benefits of this project. And so then it no longer scores as well as it did. And that the transfer, as you're saying, that is accurate to people's experience today. It is a deterrent for taking transit when people have to change. And so providing that higher level of service with full corridor probably will result in more ridership. But as you said, there could be some reasons to study this. So if we jump ahead then and start talking about the money, it's really important not to get too attached to specific numbers because I think that a lot of these are going to change. But if you look at the black bars on here and you kind of squint and see the relative magnitude of these different scenarios compared to each other, you kind of get an idea of the investment that we would be required to make. So scenario one.
From a local match standpoint.
Yes, well, from
Okay.
every standpoint,
So
but
you're
yes, from the
saying
local
that might
match.
influence our thinking.
Mhm.
So if you could pause there for a second. 1 and 2 continue to feel really attractive to me, given everything you've just said to this point. My head is still having a little trouble. 3 is, can you remind me? 3A?
3 is the BRT improvements between Forest Grove and Hillsborough only.
But the bus runs the whole way.
The 57 would continue.
Oh, so there is a transfer.
There would be a transfer to the regular line 57 in scenario 3. In 3A, the articulated buses would continue for the corridor.
Okay, so the FX continues.
Yes.
Okay. I think I got it. And in 2A, FX continues.
Correct.
2B does not.
Right.
Okay.
So
And
what,
1 FX is the whole thing.
right, the whole corridor.
And 2A, it's transfer. No,
2B is the transfer.
and 2, remember there's
2.
3.
Oh, right, 2 and 2B, correct.
Okay,
It's confusing.
I'm good. I got it.
Basically, anything with a light blue is a trans.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. If it has light blue, there's a transfer. So what this slide is communicating is the maximum.
2A doesn't require a transfer because it's the continuous FX.
2A is not, there's no blue in it.
Right, there's no blue.
2.
Oh, yeah, and the little image legends on the far left is well, those little icons that sort of reflect the different route options.
Oh, that's not blue?
There's a.
Oh, it's green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I see it here.
2,
Here.
2B and 3 are all
I
blue.
didn't
Yeah.
pick up
And
on it.
there's also just a little gap between the lines too, that helps to signify the ones that require the transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
It's pretty
I-
subtle, but.
I'm looking here now. Sorry. Thank you. Yep.
So the maximum amount of money you can get from a small starts grant is $150 million. And so that's that first black line that you see on this chart. The maximum project cost is $400 million. So you can have a $400 million project that you bring forward and you can receive up to $150 million in grant. The rest of that money has to come from somewhere. So when we start talking through these various scenarios and thinking about what that local match commitment would be, you would see that in the orange bar that's next to the blue bar. The lighter orange bar are other improvements that would be associated with the project, but could be somewhat disconnected from the small starts project itself. So those are some of the other amenities and improvements we need to make, which could come from a different funding source. And then there's some additional local costs required for the 2 scenarios that have the continuation of the FX buses without the bus enhancements. We would need to make some station improvements. Basically, those buses are different, so they would need different kind of pads essentially for people to stop at.
I think we've asked the question about then why do we have to use the FX if we don't have enough passengers right now to really substantiate that? And I think the response was that's a small part of the cost.
It's relatively small, and you can see that in that the darker red bar is relatively small, at least in scenario 2. And scenario 3 is quite a bit bigger just because it's misleading a little bit the way the little graphic shows it. But the stretch from Hillsborough to Beaverton is quite long. And so there would be a number of improvements at a number of stations in that area.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see
Yeah.
that.
So do we have, so I see things on the order of 104 million, 182 million and 232 million. What hardest? Do we have any hard money around? Do we have any harder money around? And is hardest just a hope and a dream? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah.
We somehow managed to find, well, we didn't. City of Portland and somebody else who I can't remember found the money for the local match for division.
And yeah, and I think that to your point earlier, why are we looking to eliminate some scenarios? I think, there are some. Cost is obviously a consideration. Like Aaron said, these are very preliminary numbers and subject to change. But I think, this does beg that larger question around local funding matches, right? And this could potentially be a quite significant one, depending on which option we go with. And we haven't really started discussions yet about potential jurisdictional cost shares for the local match at this point either. So there's a lot of questions to be asked here. And of course, we're obviously in a somewhat constrained financial environment for our primary transportation funding source.
I'm going to maybe be direct on this one. So the board always has options looking at our transportation plans to reprioritize transportation projects. That would mean certain projects wouldn't get done in lieu of a project like this getting done. That is an option. The other option that LUT is working on in partnership with our Chief Financial Officer, Greg Munn, as your board is aware, currently now we do operate within MISTEP relative on a pay-as-you-go. What we need to do some more homework on, we are not ready, but is that the best financial strategy moving forward, or what is that debt versus pay-as-you-go option so that we can bond additional projects? We're not ready to answer that question yet today. We can do more homework if your board wants to understand what those trade-off options are in the future. So that's a very direct, we don't have a set aside that we could come forward in this conversation without that trade-off.
We don't have any buckets of money anywhere.
No, we don't.
We'd have to reprogram anything.
Yep.
And so I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm going to be bold. I'm not interested in pursuing any options that involve a transfer. So I'm looking at 1, 2A and 3A. And we've got
One.
no
2A,
1.
2A and 3A.
2A and 3A.
Yes.
In alignment with the staff recommendation. Okay.
It is.
Yeah.
And, but also I don't want us to be picking TV Highway over Southwest Corridor or Southwest Corridor over TV Highway. We have to have a full county solution.
Well, the Southwest Corridor though would have other larger funding opportunities.
Still has a local match. We don't have an
Yeah.
answer to that yet.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Yes. And those are great observations, and thank you, Mrs. Angie, for jumping in there. I do think that there was some discussion earlier about the broadband, maybe one-time funding, and I think there's some sense of urgency around the TV Highway project as well, that with the current federal environment, that this may be a good opportunity to move forward on a project like this while the current administration is in place. And so I think there's some sense of interest in trying to advance this fairly quickly for all the reasons that we talked about earlier, but also just given the federal funding picture right now.
I mean, yeah.
So we can move on to the questions that will come up to the steering committee, and then I think some of these will come back around as we're talking through the staff response to these questions as well. So first question, any clarifying questions about the cost or the ratings updates? And our staff comments is that we need to better understand the range of the assumed cost risk that we're seeing in these materials. We need to better understand some of those off-project elements, like other things that would need to be done as a part of the project, but that we're not identifying as a part of the Small Starts project. And we do want to better understand the benefit of waiting until the project is more competitive, because again, we're doing a lot of work around a project that's maybe scoring a medium right now. Maybe we need to rethink that a little bit before we submit the application. So that you believe can be dismissed at this time. And so staff had the same conclusion, which is that looking at the options that would force a transfer is maybe not reflecting the direction that we had hoped the project would go at this time. And so that was the staff recommendation coming into this. We think that that would likely impact the ridership, and that would again make the project even less competitive as we look at the numbers.
Do you want us to go through all of your recommendations and then open the floor for questions and answers?
I think we can do it as we go, if that's easier for you.
Okay. Commissioner Rogers, thoughts and questions to this point?
He's on mute.
We can see you on mute, that's all. You're working on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. I think I'm off now.
Team
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah, thanks. I continue to like complete streets. I continue to say that we ought to do option one. It gets an entire one. We can always break it up into funding options, and I certainly understand that. I'm still a little unclear when you say local match, what that means, whether that's purely Washington County or whether or not there's going to be some TriMet and maybe some regional dollars as well. So that's not really clear in my mind. I also share the concern that as you look holistically at all of the various projects within the county, including the Southwest Corridor, which I know TriMet wants to come back with again, where are we going to find matches for some of these, and how are we going to prioritize? So preliminary, that's where I'm at, but I still like one. I understand there's a big ask on that, but you don't have to, you can break it up and segment it. That's transportation often is done that way. This isn't you don't have to do everything. Yeah, that's a funding question. You have to plan things if you're ever going to be effective. That's my thought. So thank you. That's where I'm at.
Okay, Commissioner Fye, let me reinforce that for the purposes of this work session, you get to be a district commissioner as opposed to the board rep. So who wants to go next?
If I could just clarify the question on the local match, that would be all of our partners. Any partner who can bring that money to the table could contribute the local match. And so that's not all on Washington County necessarily to bear. And one of the later slides we addressed that we would like to know what ODOT's commitment is to this corridor, since it is an ODOT facility.
Well, the interesting Roy's comment about TriMet kicking in on the local match as well. That conversation hasn't been even broached in our meetings. And I'm kind of wondering, why hasn't TriMet stepped up and said, we're a partner with you. We'll work with you on the local match. I mean, it's kind of like we're fixing all of their problems. And
Well, I think that's a built-in assumption. It's a transit project. TriMet will step up with some local funding commitments. So I think what we have not really gotten into, as you said, was really thinking about exactly who's going to contribute, exactly how much, right? There's always a process. A part of the planning process is developing a funding strategy. So we're kind of in this mode of trying to identify some potential alternatives to carry forward, costs as a consideration, but we haven't gotten into the weeds yet of the specific funding strategy, who provides how much money. But I do think there's a question that we'll come back to a little bit about just, trying to assess the different partners' sort of capacity and willingness to contribute.
And just to add, we've been going through this process of identifying projects to put in the regional transportation plan. And there was a presentation at WCC about what ODOT is submitting and TriMet submitting, all the cities. So there's some bits of money kind of squirreled away in sort of, as potentially could be tapped into, but just to keep it on the list, so that it's in the regional transportation plan with the full funding discussions yet to come when we know. So people are aware of the need and have some placeholder dollars in there, but it's not like a handshake. It's not like a signing agreement. We've got that to come, but people are aware of the match, of the need for a match.
So that phraseology of swirled away.
Well, okay. Actually, something else.
Does not
Okay, all right.
help
All right.
us. It's what, let me finish. We have money that agencies have through whatever means allocated to them. They're just not as essentially appropriated.
Yes, right. And it's, and their estimates like sidewalk or crossing improvements and things that could be
Right.
appropriate.
Wonderful.
You caught
Thank
me
you.
off there, sorry.
It's okay. So,
You're retired, you don't care.
so it sounds like Commissioner Billy is thumbs up on dismissing these three.
Yep.
Me too.
Okay,
We're not talking about what we want though yet, right? Well, Roy did. Commissioner Rogers.
correct. We were just answering that question. He answered more than that question, but that's okay. Okay,
So the next question, more information that's needed in order to get to that locally preferred alternative decision. And staff comments were, we really want to have a better understanding of the vehicular travel time along the corridor with these bus station enhancements. We just don't have a good sense of how that interaction with these BRT buses and the vehicular traffic is going to work. And so this is something that will be worked out through the technical planning work that happens. We also would like to know what happens to the north-south roads that intersect with TV Highway with these improvements, particularly with transit priority. That will make things go east-west really quickly, but it could have negative impact on north-south routes. And so again, just something we need more information about.
and we hopefully will have data from division.
Exactly. A strategy to advance and coordinate the safety and access improvements. We need a way for people to be able to safely get to these enhanced transit stops, and that needs to be a part of the conversation that we have going forward. We want to make this a safer corridor overall for everyone. And then we get to defining ODOT's commitment. What is ODOT willing to bring to the table, and where would that funding come from? And then have a better understanding of the level of community support for this project. We know the community asks often for improvements to TV Highway. Is this project getting at what the community would like to see?
Everything that you're asking or stating here sounds like useful information. But not unusual.
Right.
Anything you would add to the list, Commissioner Rogers? Or anybody at the table? Okay, we can keep going.
And so here's all the questions back together again. So that last question, note, it did not have its own slide. And the reason it didn't have its own slide is that the way, again, we're interpreting that question is that if the investment is only for a portion of the corridor, what would we need to do in order to get there and make that agreement? And we don't think we know enough yet as staff to make a recommendation on that. And our interpretation was that that really doesn't meet our goals for the corridor. And so if we're only doing a segment, we're probably not meeting our goals, and that's probably not something that we can get behind. And that's different than having a conversation about phasing. We could choose to do the project in phases.
Wait, you intimated that depending upon how we split up the corridor, we may not satisfy the equity needs. I'd understood that to be the equity needs for qualifying for a small starts.
This is a different question. So this
But
question,
it's so long.
I know, and again, we didn't write these questions.
So I probably don't understand that question
Right.
well enough.
Right. I think that what it's really getting at is if they were to parse the project down to only do one of the segments. So essentially, I think one of the scenarios that would force the transfer, can we get to agreement? What else would you need to know in order to agree to that? And we were surprised by this question. We think it's a little bit out of order to ask that question at this time. And we're still kind of at this point of trying to determine our outcomes. And as Commissioner Tree said, we're not talking about what we want yet. And so staff didn't really know how to answer this question or respond to it. And
I
that's why
can
we
give you a
didn't try.
proposed answer.
Everything.
That's the wrong question at this stage of the game. If you're wondering what I might want to know, then it's what scenario would reach all of the project goals and minimize the number of transfers? That's the only possible scenario description that at this juncture I could give you, which is not to say that is a lifeline for keeping any of those transfer cases,
Mhm.
ones with blue, alive. What do you think? By being too
Well,
bold?
there's only one transfer in there. I guess it's, you said minimize transfers. Well, there's only one. So
No,
that's
no,
pretty
no.
minimal.
Oh,
So I think
Think of that.
maybe maybe if you could go back to one of the
I mean
slides.
the
that had
volume
the little
of transfers.
Yeah, so I think as there's maybe a couple variations as I'm sitting here thinking about that question more. There are the scenarios 2, 2B, and 3 that require a physical transfer from one bus to another. There are the other options 2A and 3A that would continue the green bus with lesser enhancements on one end or the other. So there could be a little bit of a nuance in that question about while we may think the ones that actually require physical transfer of buses are not practical to move forward, if the other scenarios that maybe require or involve lesser improvements on one side of the corridor or the other, are there particular elements that might factor into that? So I think we think that question might just not be ripe quite yet.
But didn't we remove those in slide 14? The transfer ones.
Yeah, I, in a way, I feel like they're saying, how do we get these blue-green ones back in the mix? And guess what? I feel like it's encouraging us to, I'll just be blunt about it, shortchange the Forest Grove and Cornelius, the ridership west of Hillsborough, and that's not a reasonable picture.
So we did.
Let's stick to the blue, stick to the greens, the full greens.
Aaron, I understood that question during our briefings. Correct me, Commissioner Willie. If the preferred option is the full corridor, but we're only able to get small starts investments for portions of it, say 3A, right? Because there's a lot less money. Would Washington County still champion the project? And would we still support? Because our preferred option was the full corridor. And now Metro and TriMet, the team is able to get small starts investments, so they only could do 3A. So that's how I understood this question.
3A FX continues.
So I think what we might be saying
Funding.
the same thing. It's
This is about funding, right? Like,
exactly,
Yeah.
right. So I think we would just want to be careful if that scenario were to happen. If Washington County says, we want scenario 1, we understand that might take a really long time and we might need multiple small starts or multiple grant funding sources in order to do this. But we all agree we're going to work together over the next number of years and get that done. I think that's one kind of agreement. What I don't think we can agree to is define the project as only a piece of the corridor, right? Because to us, this is a whole corridor that needs some level of improvements. At least I think that's what I've heard.
So I think it's still wrong to ask us to select down below 1, 2A, and 3A. We don't know enough yet. So what you were suggesting is us playing that card when we don't know that that's the situation we have to do yet. So I'm not willing to negotiate against myself. I want to learn more before we have to make that choice.
And that was staff's impression as well, that the question is just a little bit out of order. And we had a really hard time not wordsmithing this when we put together these slides for you, but we wanted to ask the same questions that you will see at the Thursday meeting. And I think that's all we had put together.
Did that help you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially the last question and the narrowing down, I think was it, you needed to have a board conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think that at the meeting on Thursday, there could be an opportunity to discuss that fourth question and really make sure that we're all understanding what the team's trying to ask. Excuse me, and that we're, yeah, and if needed, we can always come back and check back in and try to get some additional feedback. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad we had another opportunity to talk about this.
Let's see, today's April 11th. We have 2 more meetings before the end of the month, 2 more Tuesday meeting sets. Do we have any more transportation projects between now and then?
We do, but this might be Chris's last turn at the table if that's your, that's your
Well,
question.
we do know that we hope to, or at least some of us hope to participate in your wonderful retirement celebration. Good on you. But you have been invaluable to all of us for so many years, not only in your Washington County service, but in other public service. So
Yes. I think I've
it's,
been working with Chair Harrington for 18 years, I figure. And Commissioner Treese and I have been working together, yeah, at least from regional
at least a
partners
year
days.
longer.
No wonder you're ready to
And
retire.
then I know you since you were there.
No, be careful.
Rogers all the time, all those years at JPAG. So, yeah, no, and I've had the pleasure of.
Yeah, 2 months.
No.
New one. No, it's been,
So it's
just
not
been-
your fault she's retired.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
No, it
I
is.
appreciate the friendship as well as the
Yes.
professional relationship. So thank you. And I don't expect that to end.
Yes, we will stay in touch. No, it's been just an honor. I just feel so fortunate. I've had such a great career. It's just been so interesting and challenging. And I just have loved being able to continue to work on these problems and work through them and learn new things. And coming to Washington County was just a real treat. It's just been great. I love the collaborative environment here and across the county, and the just the sort of closer, the hands-on, all the learning about how things really get done, you know, the roads get built and all this, the development, the building inspections and the permits. It just gives you a greater appreciation of the way the whole process
Community
works.
building
So
works.
And Chris,
and I've enjoyed working with all of you.
didn't you, did you start the Women in Transportation Group?
I did not start it, but I was a president and on the board for a dozen years. So
So there's
Well,
that.
yeah,
element
leadership.
For the regional
Yeah.
aspect as well.
yeah, early on in Seattle, it was like a membership tray. I had a little recipe box with little cards.
Oh.
You try. So, yeah, no, I was on the board in Seattle in, I don't know, 84, 85, something like that.
Wow.
So, yeah, no, it's been a great, I tell you, transportation land use is just a great career. It's just so changing, and you have the opportunity to work with the public, and it's all about money, I tell you. That's something that Aaron didn't mention, but we are really hopeful to pursue additional grant funding to get some of those other needs met in this. And I've been talking with ODOT staff and trying to push them a little bit more about helping us out here. You know, they've gone for raised grants for Outer Powell or Inner Powell, and to help us out here. They've encouraged me that we should write a letter on their statewide transportation improvement program to kind of highlight some of those things. So
This
We'll
is not,
see.
this is supposed to be about you, not.
Oh,
necessarily
yeah,
about
right.
work. And yeah.
well, it's just, yeah, I know, but it just
Pointing
is.
that out.
It just is. Well, thank you.
Well,
Thank you. I managed not to cry for the first time.
A couple of things before you go. In a second, I want to turn the mic over to Commissioner Rogers, but I also want to mention, picking up on what you were just talking about, where you have pushed others, and that really reminds me of your grace in doing so. Your second comment about ODOT encouraging you really highlights that collaboration. And I think the challenge for us in partnership with Stephen is how on earth are we going to get all these letters written now? I can only imagine the midnight hours that you were, or the midnight oil that you were burning to do all of that. So, but I do want to make sure that we give Commissioner Rogers the opportunity to share his thoughts too.
Well, thank you. Chris, we said a little bit of goodbyes yesterday, and it was a pleasure working with you, as I mentioned. You have not only been a wonderful asset for Washington County, you've been certainly a person who has regional significance, if not statewide significance. And it's that's saying a lot. I mean, we have a lot of people who do transportation things, but not very many rise to the status of being an expert that people look to for guidance. So that's all very good. So I would say that about you, and we'll have our chances to say goodbye as we talked about it. I do have one final question on this project, though. I don't have a sense as to where the region is in terms of prioritizing this project. And I have to tell you, and this is just me talking, it's a little disheartening after this many years of saying that this is an important project for us. I know it's expensive. I know it's difficult, but it's a little disheartening for the regional partners not to say, this is so important to us. We're in the boat rowing with you. I mean, I haven't heard that, and maybe I've missed it, and that's my bad if I did. But I think it's a critical issue to find out, because frankly, if the rest of the regional partners are saying, yeah, we got a bunch of projects too, that's just something out there in Never Land, and yeah, we'll certainly put it on a list, as it's been on a list forever. That's really not doing us a lot of good, and why burn a lot of effort? If they're saying this is so important, it's one of the top 3 or 4 projects in the region. If they would say that, then that's why I keep going back to one and saying, you know, we all agree to that let's plan out the corridor and then fund it in segments and see who really are partners in this. And so I don't know if you can find that out. Chris, maybe you can do some spying and some stealth-like work and try to tease that out. But it's important, I think, to know that before you waste a lot of political capital. This board, who is enthusiastically behind this, spends a bunch of time only to find out that it was just going to get on a list anyway, and nobody was going to finance it unless we would find out that we would shut down our jail, shut down our county, and put everything we got into doing this, which isn't going to happen, obviously. So does that make sense, or am I asking you the wrong question?
Yeah, and I would say, Commissioner, I think this is one of very few larger transit projects that's going into the regional high capacity transit plan and into the regional transportation plan. So I think there's a demonstration of support for the project. I think your question is sort of 2-part. Is there a demonstration of commitment and a financial commitment? And I think the second part is obviously the more challenging one. But I think there will be support from our regional partners. Everybody's, I think, interested in moving this project along with 82nd Bus Rapid Transit, and Southwest Corridor obviously remains a transit priority for the region as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for the kind words. And yes, there will be other opportunities to see you before I leave.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, team. We really appreciate your flexibility in joining us this afternoon.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, job
Got
well
well
done.
Thank you.
Anything else for today to our leadership team?
No, I just want to extend the appreciation to the LUT staff. It wasn't just about making themselves available. They actually put together the PowerPoint presentation and all the materials so that that's accessible to the public too. So I do think they completely went above and beyond.
Yeah, I want you to take the rest of the day off. Go ahead.
Or at least resume to previous programming.
I think they're going to previous programming. I know this group well enough.
Well, and that brings us to the end of today's work session agenda. All before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and today is only Tuesday, so please pace yourself. We will have the Special Housing Authority of Washington County meeting on Friday morning at 8 a.m.
And it's okay to zoom into that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I
I'll
didn't
be
know.
here in person.
I'll be here in person this summer.
Oh,
You wimp.
In the
How come?
auditorium.
you can be here too.
Yeah, although I don't. I'm not good, but yeah.
Okay, well, that's it for today. Thanks, folks.
Would you unplug me when you unplug you?